Christopher Wray looks like he's on the way out. We're going to have a little chat about that. We have China, Syria talk. We have domestic talk. What's going on with Pete Hegseth, Joni Ernst, Sean Spicer's here. All that and more coming up on I'm Right. All right, before we get to the Christopher Wray stuff, which I'm going to get to here in just a moment, let's talk about something that is really, really, really wonderful. I was thinking about this last night. I was talking about it with my wife, and we had the Daniel Penny acquittal yesterday. We've had the Donald Trump election. There have been little story after little story after little story out there. There's something good happening, not just here in America, not just with the White House or things like that. There's something good in the air. Don't you feel it? I feel it. And I was sitting around, again, I was having a discussion with her, and I was just kind of working it through my mind. What is happening? What am I seeing? And here's what it is. And this will tie us directly into Christopher Wray, getting ready to resign, things like that. We're watching a contraction by the system, by the communists, by the evil people out there. A contraction. Here's the best way I can describe what that means. A contraction. Have you ever, you know what boxing is, obviously. Probably you've seen boxing at some point in time in your life. And if you watch enough boxing, you'll see something from time to time, a fighter who's used to punching a lot. He punches a lot, punches high, punches low, left, right, punches a lot. But he goes up against a counter puncher and keeps getting burnt every time he punches. Every time he punches, he throws that left, catches one in the ribs. Throws that right, gets smacked upside of the head. And what happens is after enough pain, after he gets counterpunched enough times, he just stops punching for a while because it hurts too bad. Now, he's going to start punching again, and we'll get to that with the system here in a little bit, but he's going to start punching again. But for a while, it hurts so much that he really can't do much but dance around the ring and block whatever he can block. We had a long period there. I would say maybe the start of the Obama era. But we had years and years and years there where the communists in this country were on the offense and they had all of the cultural momentum. And you saw it everywhere. You saw more radical change in this country in the last 10, 15 years than people had seen since the 60s in this country. Just radical change after radical change, and none of them good. Everything kind of seemed to be going against us. Why did it always seem that way? We're losing corporate America. We can't even watch a decent TV show anymore. The movies are all gay. Well, what happened was the communists, feeling pretty good in the ring, started punching and landing a lot. And momentum, as it built, caused them to keep punching and keep punching. And then COVID came, and then they were really masters of everything. They just got to embrace total tyranny. You do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. And then St. George Floyd dies, and then they really ramp it up even more. The animals were in the streets. Woo, I'm going to Foot Locker. But then something happened. And I don't think it was just one thing. You don't ever want to boil it down to just one thing. Something turned, something changed. And the people of this country, and really this is global, the people of a lot of the Western nations started to chafe against it. Started to say, that's too far. I don't like that. Oh, wait a minute, you're going too far there. Hold on, I don't like that. And we started punching back. And the Trump election was a big indication of it. That was a huge, probably the biggest one, but you're starting to see it everywhere. It seems like the system got counterpunched a few too many times, and they're contracting. And you should put a smile on your face about it. Christopher Wray came out last night. He's going to be resigning his post at the FBI. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why Christopher Wray is resigning at the FBI, because he's about a month away, give or take, from getting fired by Donald Trump. Doesn't want the stain, the disgrace of being fired. And before we get into little Christopher Wray's greatest hits, let's make sure we understand that Christopher Wray resigning, losing his post, is not near enough. It is not justice at all. taking over the Federal Bureau of Investigation and turning it into the Stasi against your political opponents is a crime. Christopher Wray has committed criminal acts, many of them against the citizens of this country. A resignation is a good step one. Let's go to the highlight tape on Christopher Wray.
How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment by the Inspector General?
I'm not sure actually that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
Well, the internet will remind you of that in moments.
Our focus is on malign foreign disinformation, that is foreign hostile actors who engage in covert efforts to abuse our social media platforms, which is something that is not seriously in dispute.
I have to stop you for time. That's not accurate. You need to read this court opinion because you're in charge of enforcing it. Elvis Chan testified under oath in charge of this for you. He said 50%. He had a 50% success rate in having alleged election disinformation taken down or censored. That wasn't just foreign adversaries, sir. That was American citizens. How do you answer for that?
Well, first off, I'm not sure that's a correct characterization.
Comes right out of the opinion. You should read it.
Of his testimony. But what I would say is the FBI is not in the business of moderating content. As you know, this is a very active, ongoing investigation, and there are some restrictions on that, but we will do our
we
best
can handle
to
classified information, and we fund your department, and so you need to provide that.
It's not, respectfully, it's not an issue of classification.
People trusted the FBI more when J. Edgar Hoover was running the place than when you are. And the reason is because you don't give straight answers. You give answers that later a court deems aren't true. And then at the end of the day, you won't criticize an obvious shakedown when it's directly in front of us. And it appears as though you're whitewashing the conduct of corrupt people.
Respectfully, Congressman, in your home state of Florida, the number of people applying to come work for us and devote their lives working for us is up over 100%.
We're deeply proud of them, and they deserve better than you.
That was but a taste. Christopher Wray sent the FBI after angry school board parents because Merrick Garland told him to. Christopher Wray set up a bunch of poor schlubs for assassinating or trying to kidnap and assassinate the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. You remember that whole crooked scheme. Christopher Wray raided Mar-a-Lago. Christopher Wray arrested pastors, pro-lifers. Christopher Wray covered for the Bidens at every turn. In fact, he's the reason that Joe Biden ever won the White House to begin with. Christopher Wray resigning is not even close to justice. Christopher Wray resigning to go work on this corporate board and that corporate board and bring in $5 million a year, flying on private jets the rest of his life is not justice when you've taken over the top federal law enforcement arm and you have used it against your political opponents and to protect Democrats. Resignations aren't enough, and that's not what this country needs. It's time for people like Christopher Wray and Elvis Chan and others to go to federal prison. Which brings me to Chuck Grassley. I am seeing a lot of celebration over what Chuck Grassley did yesterday. In case you haven't seen, I have the letter here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you're welcome to. It's all available for free online. This is, as you can see, a fairly long letter from a one Chuck Grassley, ranking member of the Committee on Budget. Kind of a big deal, right? And he sends a letter. Of course, he opens it up talking about how 7 years ago, I supported you. But now he's lost confidence in Christopher Wray. Okay? Well, that's good. I'm glad you sent that letter, Chuck. So Christopher Wray was about to be fired. Even if he didn't resign, Christopher Wray was about to be fired. He took over the Stasi. He used his power in the Stasi to attack the American people for 7 years, Chuck. And for 7 years, this letter was nowhere to be found. Hold on. Let me check the date again. Yep, December 9th. Wow, look at that. December 9th, 2024, Chuck Grassley sent a letter. Christopher Wray is already resigning. Why now? Where were you when we needed you? Oh, I know Chuck Grassley sees the contraction of the system, and now he's going to act like Mr. Tough Guy, going to hold the FBI in check. But Chuck, 7 years of abuse. This letter was nowhere. Where were you? I'm tired of this, man. I'm tired of the followers we have who are our elected politicians. I'm tired of them always coming in a day late and $1 short. The school board moms didn't need a letter on December 9th, 2024, Chuck. They needed your help when it mattered. The pro-lifers being sent to federal prison didn't need a letter on December 9th, 2024, Chuck. They needed you when it mattered. Donald Trump, his family, had FBI agents rifling through his wife's underwear drawer. They didn't need a letter on December 9th, 2024. They needed you back when it mattered. And back when it mattered, Chuck, you were nowhere to be seen. Pathetic. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. Sean Spicer is going to join us in a moment. Speaking of pathetic, Pete Hegseth, is he going to get through the Senate, or are these losers like Joni Ernst going to hold things up? We'll talk to Sean about that in just a moment. Before we talk to Sean about that, let me talk to you about sleeping at night. I love to sleep. Sleep's my favorite thing in the world. Well, that's not true. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I love it. And I sleep like a baby every single night. Even those days where days maybe been stressful, had a little extra coffee, still sleep like a baby because I have dream powder from Beam. And it's not the sleeping, right? It's a cup of hot chocolate. It's all natural, melatonin, things like that. But it's not the sleeping, it's the waking. When you wake up after you had Beam the night before, you don't feel like you took something to sleep. You feel like you slept naturally like a baby all night. Up to 40% off. Best cup of hot chocolate you'll ever have in your life. Shopbeam.com/Jesse Kelly. We'll be back. What's all the scuttlebutt on Capitol Hill? Which one of these nominations is getting through? Which one isn't? How screwed up is Syria right now? I don't know the answer to any of these questions, but I bet Sean does. Joining me now, the host of the great Sean Spicer Show, my friend Sean Spicer. Okay, Sean, I love most of Trump's nominees. Some of them are just absolutely wretched, like that Surgeon General, but we don't have to get into that. But the really important ones like Pete Hegseth, they need to get through. We have to have these reforms. Who's going to make it and who's not, John?
So far, I don't see anybody not getting through. I say that because look, Jesse, just to put this in context so your viewers understand this. When Biden put forward his cabinet, not a single Democrat voted against a single nominee, not one. The only thing that's keeping any of these nominees back are other Republicans. Remember, we have a 53-seat majority. We shouldn't even be having this discussion. The president is putting forward very qualified people to execute his agenda. And barring anything that's, revelationary or, coming soon, there's no reason he shouldn't get it. And so they gave all of these morons in the Biden cabinet their spot who were not qualified. Excuse me. I don't know why we're even having these conversations among the Republican conference. The people that President Trump has put forward, because they're a bunch of babies. We are. Because look at Pete Hegseth. 2 Bronze Stars, 3 tours, Gitmo, Afghanistan, Iraq, educated at Princeton and Harvard. I mean, maybe that we should hold against him, frankly. The only thing I have against is Pete is that he went into the Army. I mean, he's clearly, could have joined you and I as but honestly, the notion that he's not qualified is something that someone in Washington says. I get that he actually might want to have the Pentagon pass an audit for the first time in 8 years. I get that he might challenge the status quo. I get that he might focus on readiness and war fighting and get away from DEI and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, I mean, this is insane. The idea that we're questioning the qualifications of these guys, because the dirty little secret is it's not about qualification. It's about whether or not they buy into a woke ideology. And as long as that's your standard, the media and the left will give you a pass. I mean, I brought this up before, Jesse. Dennis McDonough, the current Secretary of Veterans Affairs, never served in the military, never worked with a veteran service organization. He never, as far as I know, gave out mortgages or health care, the two top services of the VA. Pete Buttigieg was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, that had a total of 66 buses. And yet these people were somehow qualified to run these departments. Give me a break.
Okay, Sean, so walk me through the thinking when you have a Joni Ernst type, because this is what I've said, and you can speak to the accuracy or not, that the American people wanted reforms. They wanted Trump-style reforms. They want the Trump agenda very clearly. The country spoke loudly. But a lot of Republicans, especially the long-established ones in the United States Senate, see themselves as protectors of the system, not reformers. And so any thought of a reformer, they're actually going to join the other team. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there's something to that they're afraid of the status quo. Like, I get the current secretary of this or that gives me and make sure that my state gets taken care of for whatever commitments that I've gotten out of them during their confirmation. But the larger point is this. The President Trump got elected. It's his agenda, not theirs. And so I'm willing to give some of these other people that I might not wholeheartedly agree with a pass, as long as they're agreeing and understanding that they're buying into enacting President Trump's agenda, not their own. Right. So that's the other thing that these senators have to understand, that it's not so-and-so's agenda or so-and-so's policies that matter. It's whether or not President Trump has a problem. And that's what they should be asking questions about, is what does President Trump want to do about this? What does President Trump think about this? Because in the case of Pete Hegseth, he's made it very clear that his number one job is to execute the America First policy and keep our country safe. That's it. Full stop.
Sean, walk me through why Trump has improved so drastically personnel-wise. We don't have to rehash the old stuff. You and I have had this conversation many, many, many times before. It's like a different person. It's like a different organization. It's just winner after winner after winner. Again, a couple I may not like, but it's very clearly a professional operation of people who support his agenda. Who do we have to thank for that?
We have him to thank for it. I mean, look, I admit, you look back in 2016, he had never served in office before. He didn't have a cadre of folks. He wasn't a former governor or senator that could call this team into action. But to answer your question fundamentally, it's sort of like when a sports team plays another team for the second time, and they've seen the other team's players and the matchups, and they go, okay, we know that when so-and-so goes this way, we go that way. We know their vulnerabilities. We know their strengths. And Trump now knows these are the three things. He knows the people, the policies, and the processes to get things done. And that's the big difference this time. I've said this before, Jesse. Most administrations take 3-4 months to get up to speed. He's going to need about 3 seconds, because they know the right people. And it's not just the people that are getting brought in. It's the people that aren't getting brought in. So you're not bringing in an Omarosa and wondering why things aren't working, right? Trump this time knows, I need this person to do this job to enact this policy.
Sean, Syria, actually, I could expand this way beyond Syria, but Syria, Ukraine, other parts of the world, it's very obvious to anyone paying attention that the current administration, the Biden administration, if we're still calling it that, they're trying to get America as locked into certain places as they possibly can before Donald Trump can get in there and actually try to fix things. How successful are they going to be? He can only do what he can do. He's not a god.
Well, to your first point, I think we should just call it the administration, because I'm really not sure who's running things. It's the administration. And I think that they're going to try to commit the U.S. to certain things, but I don't think they're going to be successful. I really don't. I think that Trump will undo, he gets back to 4 years wiser. They can't hide things like they did last time, because he now knows exactly where to look and how to start on the right foot. So unlike last time where there were some things, there was a learning curve, this time he comes in day one ready to go. And so any kind of shenanigans like that are going to get undone as quick as they were put in.
Sean, thank you, my brother. I appreciate you. All right, let's talk some serious stuff with Stephen Yates. That'll get spicy. What's going on over there? Before we get to him, let me talk to you about saving a baby's life. It's about the most precious thing you can do, right? Because a baby can't save itself, can't even talk to it for itself. It's got to have an advocate. It's got to have you. Preborn sets up their pro-life clinics in the highest abortion areas of the country, where young women are killing their babies in droves, and Preborn gives these women the gift of ultrasound. The ultrasound is the greatest weapon in the pro-life movement. You get that young lady to hear that heartbeat. It's about the ears more than the eyes. She hears that heartbeat. She will choose life almost every time. And that's what your $28 buys. $28 buys that ultrasound. Go save a life. It's tax deductible, for Pete's sake. Preborn.com/Jesse. We'll be back. Syria. I know everyone's talking about it now, and it's one of those areas that people get extremely confused on. So we're going to bring experts into this show to make sure we don't sound stupid at parties when we're talking to friends and family. And there's nobody better at making us not sound stupid than Stephen Yates, national security expert with the Heritage Foundation. Stephen, I don't want to sound stupid at the party. Assad was a bad guy, but the rebels are bad guys. Who am I supposed to be rooting for here? Talk to us about Syria.
Well, Jesse, you're not wrong about this being actually pretty complicated, and we can get pretty confusing. Also not wrong, Assad, bad guy, pretty much the dictionary definition there. Picture should be right there. And I think people, if maybe they scratch their heads a little bit, might remember this thing that we called the Arab Spring not that long ago, where there were a lot of confusing situations where bad leaders might be getting toppled and there was an aftermath. One in particular comes to mind, and that was Libya. Where Muammar Gaddafi, obviously truly bad guy, and there was an effort made by the U.S. government, among others, to push him out. But there was a kind of chaos and really hard to read the room about who are we dealing with in the aftermath. I think there's a bit of that playing out in Syria now. We get it that Assad was bad and probably better for the world that someone like him moves from the stage. But there's a lot of work to be done about where things go from here in Syria. And the one thing that seems very clear is the president-elect that's going to be inaugurated in January doesn't want the United States involved in moving coalitions, drafting constitutions, and trying to tell them how to govern. And that's probably a good starting point in terms of lessons we should have learned from Arab Spring.
Stephen, I'm confused why it's so hard for us to accept some of these lessons. I understand it's the United States of America. We have a leadership role, and I understand that people just, by their nature, want to fix things, want to get involved there. But we keep removing these guys because they're, but we did it with Saddam. You know, Saddam was a world-class piece of crap. You mentioned Gaddafi. Now, Assad, I'm certainly not going to applaud or cheer for any of these men, but there are some areas that are just going to be governed by bad guys, are there not?
Well, ultimately, the people that live there have to be the ones that are in charge of who they're governed by. Sometimes that's not fair. My grandfather told me life isn't fair, and so far I've discovered he was telling the truth. But there are several parts of the world, and sometimes even the United States, we get the government we deserve. But it's just the case that there are limits to what we can and should do, that if we wanted to occupy and run these parts of the world as colonies, that is a model that was tried in the past. I don't think it's what the American people want or people in these regions want. So you have to figure out, so what are you going to do to help allies in that region that are closer to the action, that have more at stake, help them do what they think is most advisable in having a stable partner and neighbor that's on their border. And I think the United States can play a role in convening those conversations, but we should be a supporting cast. We should not be the lead in these kinds of things. I think that's the adjustment we've been living through since 2016.
Why did we ever get involved in a place like Syria to begin with? I mean, it's not hard to look at a place like Saudi Arabia and figure out why we would get involved. You know, Israel, something like that. I understand there are all kinds of debates to be had, but Syria's an odd place to get involved. Why are we involved?
Well, sometimes we get involved because we think we can make a difference in a particular way. And that could just be people who are the brilliant memo writers of the world who think they've come up with a new strategy of the universe. And if your organizing theory is that you want to contain global jihadism and there's jihadism breaking out in Syria, maybe there's something we can and should do to help contain it or defeat it there. And maybe there's pros and cons to that. But we live in an era where we have a multitude of interests pulling us in a lot of different directions. We have the questions about the role of Russia and China and Iran generally that could arguably be bigger fish to fry. I think in some ways the broader Middle East is safer now because the state of Israel ignored the Biden foreign policy and went its own way together sometimes with its neighbors and took decisive action. That's basically the model of where we need to go. I think it's our missionary impulse, which could be admirable in some ways, that gets us to think we need to be the ones jumping in and doing these things. But I think that this is a treacherous devil's playground, particularly in Syria.
Speaking of treacherous, Stephen, how are we supposed to handle the Kurdish issue in this area? They sit there right next to Turkey. Turkey obviously doesn't want them, hates their guts. This new regime, they're not going to be big fans. The Kurds are sitting on 30 to 50,000 ISIS fighters, depending on who you happen to talk to at the time. We can't allow 30 to 50,000 ISIS fighters to go back to carrying AK-47s and butchering babies. How do we handle this?
It's a really good question. I don't have a perfect answer to that. This is one of those legacy issues of when you randomly draw lines in sand that don't accurately capture where civilizations are, but just where military powers decide to draw them in a moment in history. I mean, the Kurds are divided across different sovereign boundaries. The ethnic group of the Kurds does sit on top of some substantial resources, so they have funding and they have power that comes with that. But this has been an unstable relationship with multiple neighbors for a long time. I don't think America's got the secret sauce to solve that. But my point of view is when these kinds of activities rise to a level that it really can cross a profound American national interest, we should act decisively. That's kind of what Donald Trump did when he launched cruise missiles into Syria, killing some Russians at a time. But he didn't invade and occupy the country. But he would use our weight when we needed to make a move. I think that's what we should have done with these leaders. I know people don't want to talk about taking leaders out, but it would have been a lot cheaper and more effective if we had a problem with Assad or Hussein or others, if we supported some move to eliminate those leaders. And if the bad ones come in afterwards, well, we'll deal with them if we have to. But it's much better than trying to occupy and run these countries. So we just have to, I think, be a little bit more cautious, maybe a little more ruthless in bursts to push the direction. But ultimately, it's the neighborhood that has to solve where this goes.
Stephen, what's the danger in Syria now? I realize there's all kinds of danger for the people there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm more talking about globally for us. What is something we need to be watching out for where we say, that might not be good for us?
Well, I think if we see the amassing of capabilities where another terrible strike on Israel were to take place or some other movement that would be able to reach beyond the borders of Syria. There have been things, I know it's a sore subject with Iraq, things still in memory, but there are problems with chemical, biological weapons that have been moved into that theater. So seeing the sort of travesty of a decade plus of war and that material getting moved places and used in inappropriate ways would be something to deeply, deeply watch for. They've already had a tremendous flow of refugees go out that were destabilizing at a time. I think a big question now is, with a change in leadership, how many of those refugees go back? All those that went across the land bridge into Europe and elsewhere, do they go back to Syria and try to build a better future, as the optimists might say? These are the kind of the variables that I would watch for. But right now, it doesn't look like Syria is a transnational, transregional risk if we continue to bolster our allies who have a lot of capability to bring to bear there.
How powerful of a military are we talking about with this victorious rebel group, this Al-Qaeda ISIS alliance? I don't have a good gauge on what they can do and what they can't do. Clearly, they're capable enough regionally to oust Assad, which says they can do something, but can they take on Israel?
Well, this is where if you are a constructive power, it takes more time, money, and material to do good things than it does to do bad things. I mean, really, at low tech and low cost, they can do awful things to people, whether they're in Israel or elsewhere. And that's just another way that life is unfair when it comes to militaries and bad actors in the world. They clearly are capable enough to do that. But our response should be, if Israel would like to buy more capabilities to bolster their deterrent, and if other responsible allies in the region, maybe the Abraham Accords coalition of countries, wanted more material, we should sell it to them. They have the money to buy it, and they could do more to balance and deter in the region, whether it's against Iran until it changes its form of government someday, or just generally against their proxies in the region. I think that's the safest way to go. Europe should be doing more with Turkey, who's on the other flank. They're a NATO ally, but really Europe should be doing more to bolster some sense of stability and responsibility there.
What about Russia, finally? I want to ask about Russia. They obviously want that warm water port. I'm assuming they've already lost it or they're going to lose it. I don't assume they're just going to wash their hands of this whole region, right?
I don't think they'll wash their hands of the region, and I think they're pretty comfortable doing deals with the devils that are wherever they may find them. And so while there's been a change of caste, they may be out temporarily, but I would expect them to seek to use their influence. I mean, really for Russia, I think the biggest variable in the equation is Trump 2.0, and that Vladimir Putin may have bigger fish to fry than access to a port through Syria and the proxy activity that's been carried through that avenue of opportunity that he's had. But I think once we get a clearer sense of where Trump's talks with Putin and the future of the Russia-Ukraine situation are going, we'll have a better read on where things filter into the broader Middle East. But I think President Trump is going to be really strong on the alliance with Israel, and is going to be really strong with the Abraham Accords countries. And I think that goes a long way to shaping the space that Russia would try to engage.
Stephen, thank you so much. As always, that was dynamite. Appreciate it. All right. What's going on with RFK Jr.? What does he believe? We'll talk to Jennifer Galardi about that in a moment. Before we talk to Jennifer, let me talk to you, speaking of health, about getting yourself right. I will tell you, for me, this has been a multi-year project. You know, I don't eat well. How do I make sure I'm getting everything in my body I need? Every day, I wake up and do the same thing. Chocolate powder, it's this powder, obviously chocolate flavored, packed full of vitamins, minerals, everything you need. I start out my day with that first thing when I get out of bed. I chug a glass of that. Then I eat breakfast and I take a male vitality stack every single day. These are all natural herbal supplements. I've never felt better. It's been years since I've felt this good. I feel like $1,000,000 all the time, and I have Chalk to thank for it. Are you tired all the time? Bad mood? Try Chalk. It's Christmas special time. They're giving out a free $50 bonus product now. Subscribe, save a pile of money, and have a better life. Chalk.com/JesseTV. We'll be back. All right, what's up with this RFK Jr. pick? What do you know about RFK Jr.? I have had the experience of having heard him speak several times in person, and I'll always be a skeptic of new arrivals, but the things he says about our food, about our medical industry, about the pharmaceutical industry in this country, they're pretty powerful, and this is not some dummy who doesn't know what he's talking about. He's clearly very well researched, but I bet Jennifer Galardi knows a bit more about him than I do. Joining me now, culture, health, and policy writer, my friend Jennifer Galardi. Okay, Jennifer, RFK Jr., is he just some 70-year-old chiseled quack, or does this guy know what he's talking about?
Well, the proof is always in the pudding, right? You look at this guy and he's 70, and I'm like, he's pretty hot for 70. I mean, I'd rather have him than Rachel Levine, a man who thinks she's a woman, in charge of our health and in charge of our health policy. So that's one thing. I mean, that's a step in the right direction. You didn't have to jump over a very high bar there. But I understand the concerns when it comes to alternative therapies maybe and what RFKJ is selling and non-Western medical practices. It's a little bit of a wild, wild west out there. It's not regulated. There are quite a few quacks, and he may come across as that to some people. You've got Joe Rogans of the world espousing psychedelics, which I'm highly doubtful of. The Andrew Hubermans of the world talking about some crazy stuff to make sure all the Huber dads live until they're 130 years old. And, people are like, this is nuts. So I understand that skepticism. And that's also taken out of context with people who don't understand this like comprehensive, holistic landscape of health and just kind of attack everything with the same tool. And I've been in this arena for almost 2 decades, and I still wish there was someone there that would just tell me what to do and what I should and shouldn't eat. But there's some things he's nailing, which are the additives in our food. There are definitely things we could be doing better with our food supply. We can get the red 40 out of food. We can follow better agricultural practices. We can definitely get the subsidies out of agriculture. The crops such as sugar, corn, wheat, all of these were heavily subsidized by the government, which kind of caused this explosion in junk food. They had to put that corn somewhere, so they made corn syrup. These seed oils and things that were never in foods before. My friend sent me an Instagram post today that put side by side ice cream in probably the 70s, and then ice cream now, the same brand. And ice cream back then was cream, sugar, milk, and vanilla, whatever kind of flavoring you want. Now it's a list of 50 ingredients. So there's something going on there to look at. And I think RFK has, even if he didn't get this appointment, just the awareness he's brought to this is really important. So unfortunately, the overextension of government did start this problem with kind of creating these junk foods and this addiction to junk food that we now have, which causes all sorts of sickness. Just obesity is the number one thing. But you can't necessarily solve the problem with the same thing that created it, right? So more government regulation, I think this is where I'm a little cautious with RFKJ. I don't know that more government regulation is the solution. What I'd like to see is deregulation, get the government out of agriculture, get the subsidies out, return power to the people. That's what this whole administration is about, right? Get government out of the way so then we have the opportunity to flourish. And I think there has to be an appetite for health. People have to now demand health. And I think that's what this is about, and the MAHA movement's about, is that we're now demanding health, and then we actually have to follow through. I think that's true for the whole Trump presidency. We've now been unburdened by what has been, so to speak. Trump now, I know I felt a little lighter after the last time we talked, which was the night of the election. I woke up, I was so excited, but now we actually have to do the work, and people are going to have to do the work to invest in their own health.
Jennifer, what do you think about that killer of the United Healthcare guy being Italian?
Listen now, that's kind of the way it goes with the Italians. That's a stereotype. But this is interesting because you mentioned the healthcare. This guy's obviously a healthcare CEO, right? And the manifesto from this killer, now we know more, he's really upset that the healthcare system is not properly addressing people. But you've got this behemoth that has everything to do with keeping people sick than flourishing health. And you're going to get frustrations in that. I think the timing was completely ill-timed of these people who are applauding, this maniac who killed the CEO of the healthcare company. But we do need to do something about the system, because right now it's just this never-ending circle of pharmaceuticals, diagnosis, more pharmaceuticals, side effects. more pharmaceuticals to treat those. So, that's my take.
Plus, he was Italian. All right, let's go back to RFK Jr. And you mentioned, all the quackery that's out there. You're much more in tune with, I don't know, the healing crystals and chakra weirdo Indian stuff. I don't even know what all this stuff is. How much of this stuff is he all about? Look, again, you get an internet caricature of somebody is not necessarily true. Is this a guy who rejects all traditional medicine? What is he?
No, I don't think so. And I think that's where the media gets it wrong. And of course, they're going to do that, just like they're going to crush him. If they're crushing Pete Hegseth, they're going to crush this guy in his personal life. But, he's a disruptor. He's a disruptor of the system, just like Pete Hegseth will be, and just like Trump kind of had promised. But he's not saying abolish vaccinations. We need to do more research. Just like take Ozempic. There are no long-term studies about Ozempic, and now it's being pushed through kind of Medicare to be covered by Medicare and governmental agencies. So I just think there needs to be an honest examination of the agencies, how they work together. And you pull on the string of this, and you also get to education. How are we educating our kids about health instead of treating them like these little robots that need to learn math and science, which they do? They need to learn how to read and write, but they also need to know how to be good human beings. I don't even know if you can say this anymore. Home ec. Can you bring that? Can we say home ec? I'm not sure what we would call it in politically correct language, but we need to bring home ec back into the curriculum. Obviously, physical education back into the curriculum. These kids, you put a 14-year-old boy in a seat for 6 hours a day, of course he's going to go crazy. That kid needs to punch something, throw something, run something out. We're not treating children and we're not treating people as kind of human beings. We're treating them as these autonomous little soldiers.
Yeah, we do need to bring home ec back. That was where all the chicks were. I loved home ec when I was in high school. Okay, so let's talk about these dyes. Like you mentioned, red dye 40 or whatever this weird crap is, but it didn't used to be there. So how does that come from regulation? I want you to explain to me who decided to start putting this dye crap in my Twinkies.
I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy theories out there, what it was, that it came from, I believe, something that was manufactured for weapons, and then they needed to do something with it, and they figured out they could turn it into a food dye and sell it and put it into foods to make it more addictive, or to make it more appealing to children. It really does. That bright dye is not normal. So that's a marketing thing. Again, I don't like to comment on the kind of conspiracy theories about this came from the Department of Defense. And, I don't know about that. That's not my area of expertise. But I can tell you, marketing wise, it was used definitely to make these foods more appealing, a lot of times to children.
Kids are dumb too. They'll believe that. Jennifer, thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. We have Light in the Mood. Next. All right, it is time to lighten the mood. And, it is the Christmas season. And efficiency is key when it comes to the Christmas season. You learn this as a dude. And, well, enjoy.
A little more, Jim. It's got to be a lot before. It's not. That's good. Yeah.
It was greatness. I'll see you tomorrow. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.